Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The Minnesota Vikings just dropped a bombshell that has the entire NFL world buzzing, and honestly, after the absolute quarterback nightmare they've endured over the past 2 seasons, this move might be exactly what saves their entire franchise from another catastrophic collapse. We're talking about a signing that nobody saw coming, contract extensions that could reshape their offensive identity for years to come, and the kind of drama that makes you wonder if the Vikings front office has finally figured out how to stop breaking our hearts every single season. Buckle up, because what's happening in Minneapolis right now is absolutely wild, and if you're not paying attention, you're missing one of the most fascinating quarterback situations in the entire league. Let's start with the headline that has everyone talking. Carson Wentz is coming back to Minnesota. Yes, you read that right. The same Carson Wentz who literally played half a season with his shoulder basically hanging on by a thread. The guy who looked like he was one hit away from a career-ending injury in that absolutely horrifying Los Angeles Chargers massacre that we all witnessed in pure terror. The Vikings just agreed to terms on a one-year deal with Wentz, and the implications of this move are absolutely massive for Kevin O'Connell's offense and the entire quarterback room dynamic heading into what might be the most critical season in recent franchise history. Now, before you start screaming at your screen about why Minnesota would bring back a guy who many people thought was completely washed up and should have retired after last season, let me explain why this move actually makes a ton of sense when you look at the complete disaster that has been the Vikings quarterback situation over the past 2 years. This isn't just about Carson Wentz. This is about a franchise that is absolutely terrified of going through another revolving door nightmare at the most important position in football. Think back to the 2023 season for just a moment. Kirk Cousins goes down with a torn Achilles, and suddenly the Vikings are thrust into quarterback hell. Josh Dobbs comes in and looks decent for a hot minute before teams figure him out. Then it's Jaren Hall getting his shot and showing everyone exactly why he was a fifth-round pick. Nick Mullins takes over and throws interceptions like he's trying to set a world record. It was an absolute circus, a weekly stress fest that had Vikings fans reaching for antacids every single Sunday, wondering which version of quarterback roulette they were going to get that week. Fast forward to 2025, and somehow, impossibly, it got even worse. J.J. McCarthy, the highly touted rookie, comes in and struggles immediately out of the gate. The offense looks completely lost, McCarthy can't get into any rhythm whatsoever, and then boom, high ankle sprain. He's out for weeks, and here comes Carson Wentz riding in on his white horse to save the day. And you know what? Wentz actually wasn't terrible. He wasn't great either, but he was competent enough that there was legitimate conversation about whether he should keep starting even when McCarthy was healthy enough to return. But then disaster struck again. Wentz suffers a torn labrum, and I'm not talking about a minor injury here. We're talking about his shoulder literally separating from his body, the kind of injury that should have had him on the sideline immediately. But because the Vikings had absolutely nobody else, Wentz kept playing. That Chargers game was one of the most irresponsible, horrifying things I've ever watched in professional football. You could see the pain on Wentz's face every single time he threw the ball. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, and everyone in the building knew it was wrong, but they kept sending him out there anyway. Enter Max Bromer, the undrafted rookie that Vikings fans desperately wanted to believe was some kind of hidden gem, an unknown treasure that Minnesota had discovered while the rest of the league slept. Turns out, nope. Bromer proved exactly why he went undrafted in the first place. The guy posted a quarterback rating of 14.3, ranking 57th out of 62 qualifying quarterbacks in the entire NFL. That's not just bad, that's historically awful, the kind of performance that gets you sent to the practice squad or cut entirely, never to be heard from again. So when you look at this absolute chaos, this complete and utter dysfunction at the quarterback position over 2 consecutive seasons, Carson Wentz coming back suddenly makes perfect sense. Minnesota is basically saying, we're not doing this again. We're not going to be caught with our pants down when injuries inevitably happen. We're going to have an actual competent backup who can move the football and not completely torpedo our entire season. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Vikings quarterback room now consists of J.J. McCarthy, the young gun with all the potential in the world, but still a massive question mark. Kyler Murray, the veteran acquisition who brings legitimate starting experience and explosive playmaking ability if he can stay healthy and committed. And now Carson Wentz, the insurance policy, the guy who's not going to win you a Super Bowl but can at least keep the ship from completely sinking if disaster strikes again. Let's talk about what Wentz actually did when he was on the field last season, because the numbers tell a more interesting story than the washed-up veteran narrative would suggest. Over his stretch as the starter, Wentz threw for 1,216 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Is that touchdown-to-interception ratio great? Absolutely not. But here's the kicker. The Vikings produced 4 of their top 5 offensive performances based on total yards during his starts. That means when Wentz was under center, the offense was actually moving the ball better than at almost any other point in the season. Now, you could argue that had more to do with the offensive weapons around him, the play calling, the game situations, whatever. But the fact remains that Wentz, even playing with a shoulder that was literally falling apart, was able to get the ball to playmakers like Jordan Addison, who had some of his best games of the season during that stretch. Addison absolutely feasted when Wentz was throwing him the ball, showing the kind of chemistry and trust that you need from your quarterback, regardless of whether he's the starter or the backup. This brings us to the real question everyone's asking. Who's going to be the starting quarterback when the season kicks off? Kevin O'Connell has been playing it close to the vest, refusing to name a starter or discuss his specific plans at the position. Smart move, honestly, because you want these guys competing, fighting for every rep, pushing each other to be better. But if we're being realistic, Kyler Murray is the heavy favorite to win this job, and frankly, he should be. Murray represents the highest upside option in this quarterback room by a significant margin. When he's healthy and locked in, the guy is a legitimate dual-threat quarterback who can beat you with his arm and his legs. He's shown in Arizona that he can be an elite quarterback in this league, making plays that very few other guys can make. If Murray can recapture even 75% of what he was during his best season with the Cardinals, the Vikings' offense could be absolutely explosive. But here's the thing that Vikings fans need to understand. Minnesota hasn't given up on J.J. McCarthy, not even close. McCarthy is still in competition for the starting job with Murray, and at minimum, he's competing with Wentz for that number 2 spot. The Vikings invested significant draft capital in McCarthy because they believe in his long-term potential. Adding Wentz doesn't mean they've soured on McCarthy. It means they're being smart and protecting themselves from the kind of catastrophic quarterback failures that have defined their recent seasons. The reality is that if Murray wins the starting job, which seems likely, and he plays well, the Vikings are probably going to try to extend him before he hits the free agency market. If Murray gets this offense clicking, if he leads them to the playoffs and shows that he can be the guy for the next several years, Minnesota will absolutely start working on a deal, probably sometime mid-season. They're not going to let a franchise quarterback hit the open market if they don't have to. But if Murray struggles, or if he gets injured, which has been a concern throughout his career, then you've got McCarthy ready to step in with a year of experience under his belt. And if both of them go down, well, that's where Carson Wentz comes in. He's not going to win you a playoff game. Let's be completely honest about that. But he can at least keep the offense functional, get the ball to your playmakers, and prevent the kind of complete collapse that happened when Bromer was forced into action. Speaking of Bromer, his future in Minnesota is looking pretty bleak right now. The Vikings might keep him around on the practice squad as a developmental piece, try to rebuild his confidence after what was essentially a lost rookie season. But after what he put on tape last year, it's hard to imagine other teams trying to poach him. The guy needs serious work, and Minnesota might be charitable enough to give him that opportunity, but his days as a viable NFL quarterback option seem pretty far away right now. Now let's shift gears and talk about the other massive news coming out of Minnesota that could have enormous implications for the Vikings' offense moving forward. According to ESPN's Kevin Seifert, the Vikings have budgeted for massive contract extensions for right tackle Brian O'Neill and wide receiver Jordan Addison. This is absolutely critical information because it shows Minnesota isn't just focused on fixing the quarterback position. They're thinking about the entire offensive ecosystem and making sure they retain the key pieces that make this offense function at a high level. Brian O'Neill might not be a household name for casual NFL fans, but if you watch Vikings games regularly, you know exactly how important this guy is. O'Neill has been one of the most consistent, reliable, and frankly underrated right tackles in the entire NFL for years now. He's durable, he's technically sound, he's been a staple of this offensive line ever since Minnesota brought him into the building. When you're trying to build an offense around high-level quarterback play and elite weapons, you absolutely have to have offensive line stability, and O'Neill represents exactly that. The thing about offensive line play that casual fans sometimes don't fully appreciate is that it's the foundation of everything. You can have the best quarterback in the world, the most talented receivers, the most explosive running backs, but if you don't have time to throw the football or holes to run through, none of that talent matters. Just look at Cincinnati over the past few years. They've had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, two of the most talented offensive players in the entire league, but their offensive line issues have consistently held them back from reaching their full potential. Minnesota cannot let that happen. They cannot allow their offensive line to become a weakness, especially at a critical position like right tackle. Extending Brian O'Neill needs to be a top priority because finding quality offensive linemen is incredibly difficult in today's NFL. When you have a guy who's been consistently excellent for years, you lock him up and you figure out the money later. The Vikings understand this, which is why they've specifically budgeted for his extension. Now, the smart way to handle these extensions from a salary cap perspective is to structure them in a way that doesn't completely hamstring Minnesota's flexibility in the short term. This means front-loading the contract with signing bonuses and guaranteed money to keep the player happy, but keeping the cap hits relatively light in the first couple of years, then backloading the bigger cap numbers into years 3, 4, and 5. This gives the Vikings the flexibility to continue building around these players, adding complementary pieces in free agency and through the draft without being completely strapped for cash. Jordan Addison's extension is a bit more complicated and definitely more debatable among Vikings fans. Addison showed flashes of being a legitimate number 2 receiver, especially during that stretch when Carson Wentz was throwing him the ball. He had games where he looked completely unguardable, using his route-running ability and hands to create separation and make big plays. But he's also had stretches of inconsistency, games where he completely disappeared, and questions about whether he can be a reliable week-in, week-out contributor at a high level. The question Minnesota has to ask itself is this: do we believe Jordan Addison is a core piece of this offense moving forward, or is he a nice complementary player who benefits from playing alongside Justin Jefferson? If the answer is the former, then you extend him now before his price potentially goes up if he has a breakout season. If the answer is the latter, maybe you take your time, see what he does this year, and make a decision next offseason. My take: you extend Addison, but you're smart about the structure. You don't give him elite number 2 receiver money. You give him solid, reliable contributor money with incentives that allow him to earn more if he hits certain performance benchmarks. This protects the team if he doesn't develop into that true number 2 option, but it also rewards him if he takes that next step and becomes the consistent weapon the Vikings need opposite Justin Jefferson. The beauty of extending both O'Neill and Addison is that once those deals are done, you can restructure them to create additional cap space if needed. This is standard operating procedure around the NFL. Teams constantly manipulate their salary cap through restructures, converting base salary into signing bonuses that can be prorated over the life of the contract. It's financial wizardry, but it works, and it allows teams to remain competitive even when they're paying significant money to core players, which brings us to the really exciting possibility. If Minnesota extends O'Neal and Addison and structures those deals intelligently, they could still have enough cap room to bring in another veteran wide receiver to complete this receiving core. And oh boy, are there some intriguing options available in the market right now. The name that everyone keeps talking about is Tyreek Hill. The Cheetah himself, one of the most explosive playmakers in NFL history, might be available, and the idea of pairing him with Justin Jefferson is absolutely mouth-watering. Can you imagine the matchup nightmares that would create for opposing defenses? How do you cover both Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson when they're both capable of taking any play to the house? You literally can't double both of them, which means someone is going to be in single coverage, which means big plays are going to happen. The concern with Hill, obviously, is that he's coming off a significant injury, and at his age, you have to wonder about his long-term durability. Speed receivers like Hill often see their effectiveness decline once they lose even a step, and recovering from major injuries at 30-plus years old is no joke. But if Minnesota could get him on a one-year prove-it deal, something team-friendly that doesn't break the bank, the upside might be worth the risk. Another fascinating option is DeAndre Hopkins. Now, Hopkins doesn't bring the blazing speed that Hill does, but what he does bring is elite route running, incredible hands, and an almost automatic presence in the red zone. Hopkins might be the best red zone receiver of his generation. The guy just knows how to create separation in tight spaces, box out defenders, and make contested catches look routine. If you're Kyler Murray and you have a chance to reunite with Hopkins in an offense with Justin Jefferson, that has to be appealing. Hopkins on a veteran minimum deal, or something close to it, would be an absolute steal for Minnesota. You could sell him on the opportunity to be part of a legitimate contender, to play in an offense where he won't be the primary focus of the defense, which should create easier opportunities for him to make plays. A receiving core of Jefferson, Addison, and Hopkins would be absolutely lethal, giving the Vikings the kind of passing attack depth they haven't had in years. There's also Hollywood Brown, who brings a different skill set, but could be an intriguing fit depending on what happens with his health and contract situation. Brown has shown the ability to stretch the field vertically, and pairing him with Jefferson could create some really interesting schematic possibilities for Kevin O'Connell's offense. The bottom line is this: the Vikings are at a critical juncture in their franchise history. They have the pieces in place to be a legitimate contender, but they also have some significant question marks that need to be answered. The quarterback situation, which has been an absolute disaster for 2 straight seasons, now has some stability and depth with Murray, McCarthy, and Wentz. The offensive line is getting reinforced with O'Neal's extension. The receiving core is being locked up with Addison's deal and potentially upgraded with a veteran addition. Kevin O'Connell has shown he's one of the brightest offensive minds in football, but even the best play caller needs players who can execute. With the moves Minnesota is making right now, they're giving O'Connell the tools he needs to build an offense that can compete with anyone in the NFC. If Kyler Murray can rediscover his Pro Bowl form, if the offensive line stays healthy, if the receivers stay productive, this Vikings offense could be absolutely explosive. But we've been down this road before with Minnesota, haven't we? The Vikings are experts at building hope in the offseason, creating excitement about what might be possible, only to watch it all come crashing down when the games actually matter. The quarterback injuries, the playoff heartbreak, the inexplicable losses to inferior teams. It's all part of the Vikings' experience that fans know all too well. This year feels different, though. The front office seems to have learned from past mistakes. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket at quarterback. They're protecting their offensive line investments. They're being smart about contract structures and cap management. They're thinking long-term while also trying to win now. That's a delicate balance that very few teams manage successfully. But if Minnesota can pull it off, we might finally see this franchise break through and accomplish something special. The Carson Wentz signing isn't going to make headlines on ESPN for weeks. It's not a flashy move that gets casual fans excited, but for people who understand football, who appreciate the importance of depth and preparation, who remember the absolute chaos of the past 2 seasons, this move makes total sense. Wentz is insurance. He's the safety net. He's the guy who prevents another Max Bromer disaster from derailing an entire season. And when you combine that with the reported extensions for O'Neal and Addison, plus the possibility of adding another veteran receiver, you're looking at an offense that has legitimate championship aspirations if everything breaks right. That's a big if, of course, because this is the NFL and things rarely break perfectly for any team. But the potential is there. The pieces are being put into place. The foundation is being built. Now it's up to the players to execute. Kyler Murray needs to prove he can stay healthy and committed. J.J. McCarthy needs to continue developing and be ready if his number is called. Carson Wentz needs to stay sharp and be the reliable backup this team desperately needs. Brian O'Neal needs to continue being the rock on the right side of that offensive line. Jordan Addison needs to take that next step and become a consistent threat. And if they add a veteran receiver like Hopkins or Hill, that player needs to show there's still gas left in the tank. The NFC is absolutely stacked right now with legitimate contenders. San Francisco, Philadelphia, Detroit, Dallas, these teams all have championship aspirations and rosters built to win now. Minnesota is right there in that conversation if everything comes together. The Vikings have the talent, they have the coaching, they have the scheme. What they need now is health, consistency, and a little bit of luck. So what do you think? Is bringing back Carson Wentz the right move, or should Minnesota have gone in a different direction? If you could only extend one player between Brian O'Neal and Jordan Addison, who would it be? And which veteran receiver would you most want to see in a Vikings uniform? Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, or Hollywood Brown? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I want to hear what Vikings fans are thinking about these massive moves. Make sure you smash that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown, and if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update as we track every single move Minnesota makes this offseason. We're getting close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the NFL draft, and with your help, we're going to crush that target. Share this video with your fellow Vikings fans, get them in the loop, and let's build this community together. The most important offseason in Vikings history is happening
everyone,
right
I'm
now,
working to hit
and you
2,000
don't want to miss a
subscribers, and I
single
need
second
your
of
help
it.
to get there.
I'll see you in the next
If you
one.
enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.